Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahabushai, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahabushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson, and I'm going to profile a couple of minutes of this video from Midas Touch's YouTube channel titled Top Military Leaders Rebel Against Trump Orders, ? And as we'll see in this clip, it's just a further example of a lot of personnel in the U.S. military being unpopular of the U.S.-Israeli, Jeffstein war against Iran. And I've done a few videos previously showing the discontent, among, U.S. service members of this conflict. And hey, even of Trump's administration. And things like this are only going to continue to intensify as the war escalates and as America continues to, decline on all levels. But this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
New reporting. While Trump is out there on Truth Social threatening to annihilate the entire civilization of Iran, military leaders at CENTCOM are getting increasingly worried about carrying out illegal orders, so much so that they may even have been pushing back against Hegseth's request to bomb civilian targets. That and the first articles of impeachment have been filed against Pete Hegseth, and the MAGA podcast war has heightened, Megyn Kelly being the latest to be willing to outright criticize Trump and this war. My name is Dina Dahl with the Midas Touch Network. Let's get into this. Now, first, in terms of the military reporting. So a retired Army general went on MS Now and spoke with Nicole Wallace, and he said this is what he is hearing secondhand. His name is Randy Manner, and he said that he is hearing that evidently people are already saying no to the hierarchy. The CENTCOM commander is walking a very thin line where he is trying to do the best he can to implement military objectives as he understands them without getting fired is the best way to put it. And evidently, some of the requests, he called it quiet resistant, that they were trying to redirect orders to go after civilian targets toward attacks on the military instead. The idea of attacking bridges that are clearly overwhelmingly for civilian use would be a war crime, and the planners in CENTCOM would not permit that.
I was very scared to let anybody know anything because I never have, but she always gave.
And hey, if you remember during Nero 47's during earlier this year when Trump's administration was bombing those boats, in the Caribbean, labeling them as drug traffickers, which was later found out to be fishermen from different countries in the Caribbean. You had I believe it was a commander in the Navy who resigned because he just couldn't keep going along with orders, bombing civilians just to keep up the narrative that Trump's administration was fighting, narco terrorists. Well, hey, as we're seeing here, a similar sentiment is growing. Nero 47's administration is just wanting to, go roughshod on Iranian infrastructure, whether military or civilian. And you're having those within the command structure trying to find ways to avoid, hitting civilian structures and hitting military structures. And that right there is a clear, break in the chain of command, a division, which brings us to 2 Ezra chapter 15 in the Apocrypha, verse 16. For there shall be sedition among men. And the definition for sedition is conduct or speech. Conduct, physical actions, inciting open rebellion against a ruling authority or monarch. And as that lady just said, a quiet rebellion. Those in the chain of command, finding their ways to divert, orders that they don't agree with and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. And as she also said, you're having talks of articles impeachment getting written up for Pete Hegseth, and I heard similar things for Trump. And your modern day kings and princes are those in the government. And they shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. And as I said at the beginning of the video, this tension and this sedition is going to intensify as the situation, continues to deteriorate out here. And, Pete Hegseth rubbed a lot of U.S. generals and commanders the wrong way when he had that speech where he got them all there talking about, look, we need to change things in the U.S. military. You need to fit, the physical requirement standards. You need to shave your face and stop being a beardo. We need to get rid of DEI and all that. And, a lot of people resent Pete Hegseth because he's more or less a weekend warrior. Well, you've got guys that have been in for years and actually been through things, having to be told what to do by, a weekend warrior. So that's just another strain of contention. And if you go and watch that movie Civil War, which I would highly recommend brothers go and rewatch that movie, because when it came out back in 2024, when I first saw it, I could see things here and there, but it was a very cryptic movie. But as we're getting, deeper into Trump's second administration, things that were put in that movie are making much more sense, because, you had the Western forces, which instead of looking like, a militia group, they look like a fully functioning army. Soldiers with fatigues. They had attack helicopters. They had fighter jets. They had armored personnel carriers, et cetera, et cetera. And, I was thinking to myself, shit, if they just, a fraction group, how are they having all this hardware? But, not saying it's going to play out exactly like this, but we could very well see, generals with men and artillery under their command that disagree with this administration breaking off and forming their own, little armies to go against orders they don't agree with. And as we read in 2 Esdras 15, there shall be sedition among men and invading one another, and the courses of their actions shall stand in their power. People are going to start taking things into their own hands to fight against orders and a government that they see isn't for the best interest of their country.
He said in this interview. So evidently, Hegseth would say, we should be bombing this, like when they're making their plan. And instead, the military leaders listening to his lead, they would instead say, no, would pivot and try to push them, like something what you would do with a child, basically. Oh, no, that's not. These are war crimes. Let's push it that way. But evidently, this is what he's saying. He is hearing happening. He said, quote, so I believe that there are very subtle pushbacks that already have been occurring to go after military targets. So it's almost like instead of this one, this is the target that you should be looking at. And so this is how they're basically, these military leaders are basically handling Hegseth, because he is a Fox News anchor and has no idea about war. But war crimes? I mean, talk about The Hague. They don't care if you're a Fox News anchor or not. Or talk about our own military courts. Because these commanders, CENTCOM, by the way, is the command battalion center. We have 11 around the world that is for just the Middle East and parts of Asia. So they are the ones basically in charge of carrying out any of the orders that come from Trump and Hegseth. They are well aware that it is a war crime to target civilian infrastructure. This retired general who spoke at Nicole Wallace said this was why he was not worried about Trump's Truth Social post basically threatening who knows what, right? Even sounded like it could have been nuclear, because he didn't believe those orders would be carried out. Something so severe wouldn't be carried out by these military leaders, because he's saying, I'm already hearing about them basically trying to pivot and steer them away. The Hague is a real thing. There is a real court to handle international war crimes, but we also have a domestic court. Doesn't matter who's in charge. If it's no longer Pam Bondi Todd Blanche, who knows and cares for the Department of Justice. We also have military courts. And members of the military were court-martialed and stood trial for the tortures that went on in Iraq and Afghanistan, despite the fact that there was a Department of Justice memo that basically said it was legal. The military said, no, not so fast. According to our handbook, torture is not legal. We don't really care what you directed that person to say at the DOJ. These military leaders understand that the buck stops with them. It is illegal to carry out an illegal order. They will be up either court-martialed or in The Hague. Trump and Hegseth are not going to be lasting very long. Hegseth even less so. But really stunning to even get a glimpse into this. He was clear to say he heard this secondhand. But going on national news program to talk about this, obviously the secrecy behind the military. I mean, you can't even usually criticize the president if you are serving in the military, because that is your commander-in-chief. You have to keep politics out of it. To hear even a little bit of this perhaps leaking out shows.
Right now, America has a shortage of over 20,000 gunsmiths. And that means
that perhaps they are as concerned as the rest of us, as they should be. Ironically, there's actually precedent for this, and it has to do with Nixon also, because Nixon.
That's it with this clip. But hey, what we're seeing is the continued division of the nation of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, especially in America. And as it says in Mark chapter 3, verses 24 to 25, and if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house or race be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. So, we are living in the twilight hours of Esau, Edom, especially from his stronghold America's rulership, because they are divided on all levels. And, divisions within the military and the government, hey, that's a major move maker right there. Because if those things are at odds, what do you have a chance of seeing? Which you will see, civil unrest out here. This is Isaiah chapter 19. I'm going to start at verse 2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. And this is speaking of the spiritual Egyptians as pursuant to Revelation 11, verse 8. These Americans, and they shall fight, everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city and kingdom against kingdom. Civil war between the average citizen in the government, those within the government, the military against the government, the military within itself, etc., etc. And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And, that lady was saying, you've got military commanders that know about the Hague and, repercussions they could face for committing war crimes. So they were confident in those orders not being, pushed through that Trump wants. But lest we forget, Trump is he's a madman out here. And, they've got something called the Board of Peace, which he set up a couple of months ago, which when you look at that, it talks about having a different command structure from NATO, as well as its own private military made up of, volunteers from different countries, pretty much a shadow government, more or less. And then what? In the big, beautiful bill, you had billions of dollars, even more money that goes to the military going to ICE, which, that's become more or less, Trump's private, military, with them getting military grade hardware. So something very big is coming down the pipeline. And also, Hegseth was talking about, I believe this month, having National Guard units being made into rapid response forces being put all throughout the country to quell, flare-ups of civil unrest. What do they anticipate coming? Well, we know, as pursuant to Isaiah 19, verse 2, the Egyptians will fight against Egyptians. In 2 Ezra chapter 15, there shall be sedition amongst men and invading one another. But I'm going to close it out with Isaiah 19 and verse 4. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord, Yahweh of hosts. And Trump very well looks like he's this fierce king and cruel lord set over these Egyptians, these Americans, because he's moving like a true king out here. On several occasions, he said, look, regardless of, what the government says or what international law says, I can do whatever I want. And, when he, got inaugurated and came back into office in January, he posted on Truth Social a quote from Napoleon Bonaparte that, in order to be, and I'm roughly paraphrasing this quote, in order to be a great ruler, sometimes you have to disregard the laws of the land. Hey, I can do whatever I want, and everybody else is just going to have to follow suit. But that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere, Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal. Actually, I almost forgot. One more precept. Jeremiah 51 verse 30. The mighty men of Babylon, and this is speaking of Babylon the Great, the United States of America, another name for the U.S. in the scriptures, have forborne to fight. They have remained in their holds. And we're seeing an example of that with the CENTCOM commanders, not fully following the orders of Trump or Hegseth and diverting the orders to targets they think that are more appropriate because they aren't fully, in lockstep with this government or its orders. The mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. They have remained in their holds. And like I've said in previous videos on the topic, you've got, Marines and other personnel calling hotlines because they don't want to get deployed over to the Western Asia or the Middle East. And you had those sailors on those Navy ships clogging up the toilets and the plumbing just so the ship would have to leave the region to be repaired because they don't want to fight. Their might hath failed them. And, this discontent is only going to grow as that U.S. service member death rate continues to grow with this Jeff Steen war against Iran. Official numbers are starting to come out, and they're saying it's about 750 U.S. military personnel that have been deleted in this conflict. And, in December, they're coming out with an automatic draft registration. Why? Because they know this thing's going to intensify, and they know it's going to be a very unpopular, war. So they're going to need to get as many warm bodies in there as they can by any means necessary. Their might hath failed. They became as women. They have burned her dwelling places. Her bars are broken. So, again, I'm going to say, Bad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time. Shalom Akim. This is just an addendum to this lesson. As we went into with that, previous video from Midas Touch, you've got those within CENTCOM, against particular orders from this administration. You've got numbers of soldiers against being deployed to a war they don't want to fight in. But check out this information. Imagine, you're already in a situation you don't like, and then you hear something like this. And this is from a video on Black Scout Survival's YouTube channel titled, What Just Happened Isn't What They Told You. And I'm going to start it at the 4-minute and 56-second mark. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
Now, let's get into what you actually asked for. This is where it gets ugly. Okay? The real dirty you want to know. The MAGA's not going to like this. Donald Trump, Eric Trump, linked into defense and drone sector investments, including Gulf state partnerships, Abu Dhabi business meetings, defense tech positioning in the same region that's now being escalated. Damn, when did the Trumps, Don and those boys selling drones? How'd they know? How'd they know? What do you think this would be you wouldn't be able to do this at your company. It'd be a conflict of interest. Right? And the companies being floated around this space are UAE-backed drones and defense firms, private defense contractors pushing UAV tech into the region. So they're getting rich off this war. They're getting rich. This is good business for them. So it's not going to stop. Why would you stop?
Hey, it's all just a game at the end of the day. And if you've noticed, you know, Trump's been coming out with comments talking about, oh, you know, we're with negotiations with Iran, things are calming down. What? Just to get those numbers up in the stock market. And as we're seeing here, you know, his family has a conflict of interest being involved with drone companies, you know, and weapons being used in this war. And again, as it says in Isaiah chapter 19, verse 4, and I will set over the Egyptians a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them. You know, all these presidents, you know, have had conflicts of interests and gone alongside the dictates of the elites to push their agenda. But with Donald Trump, he's just more outright with it, showing his cold, hard, you know, capitalist business mindset. You know, as Joseph Stalin said, one man's death is a tragedy, but a million men's death is a statistic. And that's what you U.S. soldiers are to Donald Trump and his, you know, family especially, and these elites, just a statistic to make, you know, to fill their bottom line with. And during his first administration, he made this famous quote: Trump refused to go to a World War I cemetery, saying soldiers who died there were a bunch of losers and suckers. You know, coming from the same guy who got out of the draft in the Vietnam War because of bone spurts, and the same guy who called John McCain, which, you know, he's a demon too, a loser.
It's funny, like you have people when you criticize Trump, they're saying, oh, you're taking money from Iran or Qatar. They're the ones taking money from the Middle East. It's insane. And this is the same people that screamed about Hunter Biden and Ukraine. Y'all real quiet now, real quiet. And even go beyond that, behind the scenes, man, you got chatter that positions are being taken, deals shifting, money moved based on escalation versus ceasefire. Barron Trump has become very wealthy over the past few weeks. You notice how Trump one day, deal the next. Market reacting both directions. And mystery $1 million investments are being made, and they're getting very wealthy. People are saying it's Barron. He's investing. It's insane. It's insane. Making deals. But people died for this. And they are lying about it. It's despicable.
Let's run it back and read what this says. Trump's kids buy into drone companies. They cancel existing contracts, then get military deals, then start wars, then sell drones to attack countries, then sell drones to countries under attack. Hey, this is just another step towards leading to that sedition amongst men and Egyptians fighting one against another. But that's it with this video. And again, to you sincere Akim and Akwat out there, I hope this was edifying. I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next